Don't have a funny face, but though, honey.
All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We have been waiting, as Kristen said, for a year and a half, Barb, for you to finish your Egypt tour. Goodness. Tonight is about reaching back into Barb's trip to Egypt, which was, I think I spelled this correctly phonetically on Facebook, amazing. And
Right.
tonight we're going to talk about temples. So many of the Egyptian temples, Barb is going to just bring those alive with her detailed descriptions, some exciting stories of her time in Egypt. And we are going to swiftly and efficiently and deftly head through two millennia. Okay, so just like strap in, people. And if you're drinking wine, you might spill it. We're going to go pretty fast here. So anyway, ancient Egypt temples tonight. And I'm not going to steal any more than that, Barb. I am going to open y'all to this, though. We are having, in Ken's words, maybe the most fun book in a long time. Right, Ken? Yep. You are saying you're loving this thing.
I love it.
He finished it.
I finished it
already? Okay, no spoilers, Ken. And although this is a really bad picture, the title is A Boy and His Dog at the End of the World by C.A. Fletcher. And this is going to be August 23rd. You got to be careful this year, folks, this summer. Tonight is the 9th. The 23rd, we're going to be doing this, which is not the last Tuesday of the month. The last Tuesday of the month is the 30th. But because Bud suggested this book, and because he can't be here on the 30th, and because there are 5 Tuesdays, and you don't care about all this stuff, do you? Anyway, 23, mark it on your calendar. And then September gets even more interesting. 2 weeks later, on the 6th of September, which is the first Tuesday, Sanctuary Kitchen. Cheryl Meyer, what are you doing? Check it out, Kelly.
Chicken Little.
Chicken Little. The first meal I had from Cheryl's mother a bazillion years ago. I'll never forget it. And your mother taught me how to love capers. I had never even met a caper till I met your mother. Anyway, incredibly excited for that. Also with some grilled Brussels sprouts, right?
Well,
gotta have some
roasted, yes.
Roasted. Anyway, it's gonna be fabulous. And the next book is going to be on the 27th, which is actually 2 full weeks later. So anyway, we'll give you those dates, but if you haven't picked this one up yet.
Yeah, and I think it's 3 weeks actually.
Yeah, 27th. Cheryl and I will be in lovely Mexico during that monstrous time apart, getting rewarded for a cruise that I won that we never have gone on. So we're going to Mexico instead. Go figure. It's a funny world. Anyway, if you haven't picked this book up yet, I encourage you to. 1, because we're getting rave reviews, and 2, because Cheryl can't put it down. So it's probably not a long read, huh, honey?
It's a long read. I think. I don't know. Ask Ken. He's finished it.
Yeah, it's a full book, 300 and something pages, I think.
Well, fair warning, but time well spent. So let me stop doing this. And Barb, I'm going to hand over all control. I think Cheryl, you may need to make Barb a co-host to do her slides, but Barb, since they probably were an ungodly size, it's all you and it's all us. So thank you so much for doing this and for all your preparation. I know this is never an easy thing to do. So all yours, my friend.
It's so much fun. Thank you. Thank you. Can everyone see the slides?
Yeah,
Yes.
They're fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I tried to make the pictures really big and the words few. So in order, because the pictures are the fun part. So my trip was in January, the last week of January 2020. So more than 2 years ago now. And we did the first part of the travelogue in April of 21. So it's been, Kristen, you're right, over a year since we did part 1 of this. The trip was a 10-day trip. We were 8 days in country with 2 days flying back and forth across oceans. And I really wasn't planning on going into any detail, but if you're interested in the tour company or anything, send me a message in the chat box and I'll get with you afterwards. Tonight, we're going to visit Egyptian temples, many of which are World Heritage Site. Some of them are household names. Some of them were made famous by Johnny Carson or by Las Vegas Some you may have never heard of before, but all are uniquely fabulous and equally so. So these temples are located from the modern day city of Luxor, where the temples of Karnak, Luxor, and the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut are located. South from there, down the Nile, to at the bottom, you see the red arrow that says Abu Simbel. And that is a stretch of about, I don't know, 200 or 300 miles in length. And lots of the temples are located right along the shores of the Nile. And there's a reason for that. The Nile was the superhighway. It was the way of transportation of getting back and forth. So many of these sites in Egypt are right along the Nile for exactly that reason. So that was the what of the temples, the where part. Now let's look at the when part. So I put on here for context so you can kind of see the pyramids that we talked about before was roughly 2650 BCE was when they began. The Valley of the Kings that we also talked about before, that's called the New Kingdom. That was about 1,000 years later. And then Alexander the Great was in about 350 BCE. And that era is called Ptolemaic. And the reason it's called Ptolemaic is because when Alexander moved on and began, turned his attention back to other parts of the world, he left in charge his primary general, who was named Ptolemy. And Ptolemy was a Greek, and all of Ptolemies were Greeks. And so that era is called Ptolemaic, and it's quite different. So we have temples that don't go all the way back to the time of the pyramids, but close. Karnak is the oldest. It was founded not quite 2000, more like 1970 BCE. So it's about 4,000 years old. Luxor, about 1300 or so BCE. Those are the ones in blue are all temples where Egyptian deities were worshipped. Philae Temple, between 1000 and 500 BCE is when it was founded. And then Kom-Ombo and Edfu, they're both completely Ptolemaic, founded during the Ptolemaic era. The two in red are temples and monuments. They are not temples where Egyptian gods are worshipped. The Hotshepsut one is a mortuary temple. I'll say more about what that is when we talk about that. And then Abu Simbel was just a monument. It was just a tribute to the greatness of Ramses. For world historical context, Stonehenge, we think, is just a little bit older than the pyramids, not much. But the Great Wall of China was contemporary with building of Philae Temple and Kom-Ombo and Edfu. And Jesus was born, we think, about 6 BCE. So all of these were BCE, before the Common Era, before the birth of Jesus. The other thing that is connecting and similar to most of these is that they're almost all World Heritage sites. In fact, there are so many World Heritage sites in Egypt that the World Heritage Site folks, the keepers of the list, no longer list all of these things separately. They've created what they call a Luxor list that includes Karnak and Luxor Temple and Hotshepsut's Mortuary Temple. And then there's a Nubian monuments list that includes Abu Simbel and Philae Temple and others. But there are just so many of these, you literally can't walk down the street without tripping over a World Heritage Site, in this part of Egypt. But Karnak itself is enormous. It's the largest religious complex in the world. It has 6 main temples, and then I don't even know how many chapels and side temples and things like that. The complex covers about 200 acres, and it was active in use daily for over 1,700 years. The little square on the right is a photo of a model in like the entry gatehouse. You have to go through and show them your little ticket to get in. And they have pictures of it being renovated, discovered and excavated. And then they have this model of what the temple looked like. And this is just one of the 6 temples. It's the largest one. It's the temple to Amun. And that area in itself is large enough to hold 10 average size European cathedrals.
Wow.
And for comparison, you see the little pylons down in the right corner at the very bottom of the model. That's about where I was standing to take this picture. You really get a sense for the scale when you see how far away those huge, enormous pylons are in the photo at the top. Just incredible size and scope.
Barb, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
When you're looking at like this picture right above, you were standing right down against this wall and we're looking past the palm trees, past the mound of dirt, and that's these 3 big.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yep.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah. Incredible. I mean, and we had about 3 hours there to explore all of this. So you can see I got thoroughly, a chance to be thoroughly immersed in every aspect of it, right?
Of course you would.
You put on your running shoes and you snap pictures of everything in sight and hope for the best. The other, one of the other really unique and famous aspects of Karnak Temple is called the Hypo style hall. It's this like forest of columns. And the hall in and of itself is 54,000 square feet. And it was all under roof at one point in time, but over the millennia, the roof has collapsed. So the pillars are still standing, but the roof is gone.
Remind us, which one is this? How old is it?
This is Karnak. This hypostyle hall was built Karnak was about 600 years old when this was built already. So this was built around 13 or 1400 BCE. So, the columns, there's 134 columns in 16 rows. And the largest are the ones that line the center aisle through the hall. 79 feet high and 33 feet in circumference. That's 30, I'll say that again, 33 feet in circumference.
Wow.
So that's where you get, the pictures of the whole tour group joining hands and standing around the column trying to circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
This design was not first used here at Karnak. This is the largest version, but the first design like this was created by Hotshepsut at her Mortuary Temple, which we'll see pictures of in a little bit. But this hypostyle hall here was created by Seti I, and some of the later decorations at the south end of it were done by Ramses II, who is the son of Seti I. So that's the 600-year difference between the founding of Karnak and the creation of this hypostyle hall. So is anybody thinking to themselves, how in the world did they build this stuff? How did they get it that high? And then how did they get up there to decorate it?
Aliens. Aliens.
Aliens, yes, of course.
Oh no. I'm serious. I think it's aliens. But anyway.
Well,
Next.
there is a theory that I offer as an alternative to the aliens theory, Joe.
It's so sweet of you to say it that way, Barb.
So you see the dirt piled up against that wall? That is
Alien.
Actually an
Alien
ancient
poo.
ramp. Yes, alien poop. That is an ancient ramp. So what they did was they would build a ramp. They would start at the bottom and they would lay their bricks and build the ramp higher and higher as they built the wall higher and higher.
Oh, wow.
And then when they got it to the top where they were finished with the wall, they started to decorate it. And when they got the top part decorated, they took away part of the ramp and then they decorated more. And then they took away more of the ramp. So they built up and decorated down as they removed the ramp.
And how do we know that?
from inscriptions and drawings and carvings in the walls.
Ah.
The
And Barb
Egyptians
made it
were,
up.
yeah,
So she
the
didn't like
aliens
my
told me I
idea.
could.
An alien whispered it in her ear, Kelly.
Yes.
Keep us secret. Here's a good story.
The
I
Egyptians
always
were,
wonder how they know this stuff, you know, like
Well-
they dig this stuff up out of the ground and they say it's this, this, and this. I'm going, how do you know?
the Egyptians were incredible record keepers. And once we found the Rosetta Stone and cracked the code on it, and were able to read the hieroglyphics, all kinds of things became known for sure at that point in time.
What is that? That stone, I don't know what that is.
The Rosetta
Oh, the
Stone.
Rosetta Stone?
Yeah, go Barb.
I talked about that the last time in the last one,
Okay.
but
Okay.
the Rosetta Stone is a ginormous stone that has 3 languages, the same text repeated 3 times in different languages.
Oh, wow.
One was Egyptian hieroglyphics, one was Demotic, which is kind of an Egyptian script, and then the third was Greek. So we knew how to read the Greek. We then, when we realized, when somebody cracked the code and realized they were looking at the same text repeated in different languages, then they were able to figure out what the hieroglyphics mean. And once they started being able to read them, they kept being able to read more and more and more and more, and learn more about it. So. Yeah.
It just occurred to me that if one of our modern languages disappears, that in 3,000 languages, 3,000 years from now, people might use like the airplane safety card as a Rosetta Stone.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Multiple languages on one piece, right?
Exactly.
All right,
love
back to
it.
the aliens. I mean, Egypt.
So Karnak, and not just Karnak, but all over these temples, they are just stuffed to the gills with obelisks and statues and all kinds of stuff. You see on here, some are in their correct historical position, like the tall one on the right, and in this little piece that's just kind of sticking there out of the row of statues. Those are in their correct historical positions. Some of them are not, especially the statues. They've been moved. This is kind of, Karnak is now kind of a statue parking lot. As they find them every place else and don't know what to do with them, they bring them to Karnak. So, yeah. The tall obelisk in pictures 2 and 4 is the Obelisk of Hatshepsut. More about her later too. It is the second highest of all the Egyptian obelisks. It's made out of one single piece of pink granite. It's over 90 feet tall and weighs 340 tons.
Wow.
Yeah. And how did they move it, Joe?
Aliens.
There you go.
Aliens with little push carts.
I thought they just like put a little alien net under their UFOs and just flew it up.
That would be an idea too, Barb, if they could drive really slowly. But
Yeah.
what isn't it? It's almost inconceivable. I mean, honestly, that these things were moved somehow by humans that didn't have, you know, and I guess the reason I say aliens is some of the studies I've done on Egypt are the accuracy with which the stones are placed at that point in time. We still could not, like with the technology we have today, could not make the pyramids.
Right? Can't do the
Absolutely.
math.
Yep. The
Basically.
stones in the pyramids, some of them are set so closely together you literally can't slide a piece of paper between them.
Yeah, and so that's when I, headed toward the alien idea, whatever. And so I'm sure that's what's it's locked up in all of Trump's boxes. He took all the alien information.
Right.
They're never gonna find it. Well, we found it.
So the picture on the left is the actual top of an obelisk that fell off. And they've got it mounted on a block there, and you can walk all around it. You can see all the carvings and everything up close. But today at Karnak, only 2 obelisks remain. All the others have either fallen or have been removed and relocated to various sites around the world. Think Paris, St. Peter's in Rome. Every place where you see an Egyptian obelisk, those aren't fake. They were moved from Egypt. They are
Just
actually
stolen.
Egyptian. Yeah, there you go, stolen. So
They're,
this is
and
the
they're
only,
just, they're solid stone, right, Barb? They're just.
they're solid stone, yes.
Yeah.
That's the thing with these objects. This isn't the only one that's made out of a single stone. The obelisks typically are one single stone, quarried out and transported, as one unit, one piece. Yep. So you see the second picture there that's got all of the statues lined up. I've got about 150 pictures like that. I thought I would spare you those because it's, after a while, you can only look at so many pictures of statues. And it's said that 30% of all of the statues and monuments in the world are in Luxor,
Wow.
between Karnak Temple, Luxor Temple, Valley of the Kings, and Hatshepsut, the Mortuary Temples and things that are around. I'll say that again, 30% of all the statues and monuments on planet Earth are here in Luxor.
That's amazing.
It is incredible. Yeah.
Do you
So
know
it's-
why God had to free the Egyptians now,
Yeah, they were exhausted.
huh?
So all of these, whether they're temples or obelisks or whatever they are, or walls of the tombs or pyramids even, they are all carved and painted. When they were in their prime, they must have been incredibly colorful and beautiful. Because these carvings, you look at them, you can still kind of make out what the scene is. This is gods attending a pharaoh here, and this is a pharaoh paying tribute to one of the gods. And you see how deep these cuts are. These things are nearly 4,000 years old, and you see how deep the cuts still are. It's just amazing how well the dry Egyptian desert has preserved all of this stuff. They don't have to worry about rain eroding anything.
There.
So, it's everything that they do just stays there forever.
You never know, they might with climate change.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so that's Karnak. Let's move 2 miles away from there now to Luxor Temple, another UNESCO World Heritage Site. This temple was started about 14, late 14, early 1300s. No, or the other way around, early 1400s, late 1300s. So Karnak had been going about 600 years before Luxor was even begun. And this temple, it features tribute areas and, for some of the Egyptian gods, but it's kind of, from reading the inscriptions, they think that it's kind of like the Westminster of ancient Egypt. They think this is where the pharaohs were crowned once it was created. And it was more about the deification and worship of the pharaohs than it was about the gods. And Luxor Temple is absolutely stunning at sunset. So I have we visited there at sunset for that very reason. And a lot of my pictures, you can kind of see how beautiful.
Barb, did you get a lot of this information on your tour, or did you study a lot before you went?
Both. We had a very, 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 great tour leader and guide. In order to be a guide in Egypt, you have to have a master's degree in Egyptian history and tourism.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah. So the guides are very knowledgeable and fabulous. And I'm an absolute geek. I watch everything that I can find about Egypt on Nat Geo and Discovery and History and all of those. So you just see the walls just seem to glow kind of pink and orange in this temple as the sun is setting. And you can kind of see more of a panorama view here with the temple over here on the left, kind of the, the courtyard out front as you approach the temple. And if you can see the mountains in the very, very faint back, way back there, those are the mountains associated with the Valley of the Kings. So literally right across the river from each other in Luxor. Just some images around the temple. This is kind of the central passageway. And the Egyptians used two primary types of columns. If you were like me in school, you learned about the Greek columns, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, right? But the Egyptians used papyrus style and lotus style columns. These are papyrus on the left. You see they look like little tubes. That's like the reeds of the papyrus that are growing along the Nile, along the banks. And that's the papyrus grows more in Lower Egypt, in the marshes near the Nile Delta. In the middle column, you see it kind of fans out at the top. That's more like the opening of the lotus flower, and the lotus symbolizes Upper Egypt. And for me, I always struggle with remembering which one is upper and which one is lower, because it refers to land elevation. The highlands of Egypt are in the south of the country. The Nile River flows south to north. So Upper Egypt is the higher land and is the southern part of the country. Lower Egypt is the lower elevation, the marshy land, but it's in the north of the country. So for me, it's backwards, and I always struggle with what those are. All right. And usually, especially in this middle part of the country, you see the papyrus style and the lotus style columns in the same areas. Like if you have a row of columns like this, they'll probably be either all papyrus or all lotus. But in one row, you may see all papyrus, and then as you walk through into the next little area of the temple, they may all be lotus style. So they do mix them intentionally to symbolize the bringing together of Upper and Lower Egypt and uniting it into one kingdom. The picture on the right was literally like the week before we got there, had just been restored and reinstalled. It was removed from its place. The granite was polished and restored, and it made incredibly beautiful. And there's a row of about 6 of these statues, and the plan is to restore them all one at a time. But it's that pink granite color that they weren't. Not all the statues were. They were. They all had like a glowing beauty to them when they were new, not kind of the brown that it is today. But isn't that incredibly beautiful? I just can't imagine what these were like when they were in their prime. Okay, so we're still in Luxor Temple, and despite Luxor, it was not used for a short period of time, like Karnak was used for nearly 2 millennia. Luxor was used for over a millennia. So it saw a lot of changes. There were a lot of Egyptian, uses, and even, changes and evolution. But then in the Roman era and the Christian era, you see the picture on the left is a mural of the apostles. It was added decoratively to the walls at Luxor. And then, once the Arabic and Islamic religion came into favor in Egypt, they began, there's also a lot of Islamic art and influences that are seen. And this is all part of Luxor Temple, invisible there. So Karnak is here and Luxor is 2 miles away. And sometimes they work together. How did they do that? One example is the festival of Opet. This festival promotes the fertility of the god Amun, and as a surrogate, also the fertility of the pharaoh. So you can see on the left two pictures are back at Karnak Temple. And as you approach the entrance, you see the line of ram-headed sphinxes. And they symbolize, the virility of the pharaoh, basically, the power of the pharaoh. And then the next two pictures are the Avenue of Sphinxes. There was literally a 2-mile long promenade avenue lined with sphinxes. And every one of these little boxes here that you see, this one has a sphinx on it, but you see all of these little flat table-like things. Every one of those had a sphinx on it on both sides for 2 miles. Egyptians never did anything by halves.
That's a lot of sphinxes.
That's a lot of sphinxes.
Do you know how many was it? Do you know?
No, I don't know. A lot.
So what happened to all of them, Barb? Have they been destroyed or something?
Many of them have been destroyed, and they knew once they excavated Karnak and they excavated Luxor, they knew that there was a row of sphinxes at the approach to both of those temples. But it wasn't until, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, very recent, that they were excavating and they discovered this avenue, and they started testing and doing test excavations and extending it. So now they know that this 2-mile long avenue exists. So they knew about the ends, but the finding out of the middle is very recent. And so, you see one of the sections that they've cleared and excavated here, but it was covered over. And one of the complications is that part of the avenue goes right underneath a very busy portion of the modern day city of Luxor.
Wow. Yeah.
So I don't know what they're going to do with it, but it is what it is, and they will figure it out. So what happened with these gods, the way they worked together was that Amun lived at Karnak, and his consort Mut lived at Luxor. So a couple times a year, Amun would hop on his boat, ride down the Nile, visit Mut for a few days, and then he would return via the Avenue of Sphinxes. They would have these festivals. So they had a surrogate of the god. Obviously, it wasn't a flesh and blood god. So they had statues, they had surrogates, but in the Egyptian mindset, the statue literally was the god. So that was how these two temples worked together. Now let's cross over to the west side of the Nile, and we'll visit the Mortuary Temple of Hotshepsut. Now this is not her tomb. Her tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings, and literally, if you imagine in your mind one of those mountains, on one side of the mountain is the Valley of the Kings, on the other side of the mountain is Hatshepsut's Mortuary Temple. So if you literally started a tunnel at the Mortuary Temple and drilled through the mountain, you would come out in the Valley of the Kings. That's how close this temple is to the burial sites, but this is not in the Valley of the Kings. So this is the temple. When we talked about the pyramids before, one of the things we said was that the pyramid wasn't just an enormous stone building standing there by itself. It was a whole little village of things. There were multiple pyramids, maybe as many as 9 or 10. There was the one big one, but then other, relatives and significant officials may have had small pyramids next to it. And there was also a mortuary temple where the pharaoh was worshipped as a deity, after death. So then the pyramids kept being robbed, and they created a real problem. They stopped building the pyramids. So they got the idea they were going to go to the Valley of the Kings, and they were going to bury the pyramid or the kings in tombs, and people wouldn't know where they were and they wouldn't rob them. But you still have the problem of where are you going to worship the pharaoh once they become a deity after death? And the answer to that is a mortuary temple. So that's what these are. The pharaoh is not buried there, but this is where the pharaoh is deified and is worshipped after their death. This is the another World Heritage Site. You're going to get so sick of hearing me say that. But this is one of the most powerful women ever. She is the daughter of a pharaoh, the wife of a pharaoh, the stepmother of a pharaoh, and ruled as a pharaoh in her own right. And her name is Hotshepsut. And you see a picture of her on the right-hand side there. That statue is at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. So it's not there on site at the Mortuary Temple. But
Does she have a beard?
she does. Hotshepsut was what I would call the original badass. She wore all the trappings of a pharaoh: the short kilt, the false beard, and the nemes, the headdress. Those were all things that only a pharaoh was supposed to wear. So she presented as a pharaoh. When she was presenting as a pharaoh, she used male pronouns. But yet she always talked about herself, as a woman. And she also claimed a lot of female power in the symbols that she identified with as well. I'll show you some of those. But she was just kind of amazing, really. So who was she? Being a pharaoh was different from being a queen. In England today, Queen Elizabeth is monarch in her own right and calls herself queen, not king. In Egypt, it didn't work that way. A queen was a queen, not a pharaoh. And so Hatshepsut had to become a pharaoh in order to rule as a pharaoh. She was one of Egypt's most prolific builders, and she was an explorer and a diplomat. And when I say she ruled as a pharaoh, one of the ways that you know that, besides seeing her dressed in the kilt and the false beard, is this is a row of statues of Hatshepsut presenting as Isis for her mortuary temple. The pharaohs all became gods when they died, and they had this way of, Osiris, I'm sorry, did I say Isis? I meant Osiris. Osiris was the god of the dead. And he never went away as a god, but the pharaohs all became Osiris. And they never saw any conflict in that. That was just the way it was. So there was the original Osiris, and then there was the pharaoh as Osiris in death. And this is Hatshepsut in a whole row of these statues at the Mortuary Temple as Osiris, which only a pharaoh would do. This is also the powers that be believe Hatshepsut as a sphinx, her head on a sphinx, which only pharaohs do as well. And again, she has the false beard and the nemes headdress there. This is also not located at her mortuary temple. That picture is believed to have been, it is in the spot where it was discovered. It was excavated and discovered. It's standing right where they found it, in what used to be up near Cairo. It used to be Memphis, in the Old Kingdom capital. And Memphis doesn't exist anymore. So, but now there's an open air museum where they've got pieces that have been found. And that's where this is. But just to give you an idea of ways, other things that have been found with Hatshepsut presenting as a pharaoh. So in order to claim her authority as a pharaoh, this is kind of faint. So I circled it in blue. You can kind of see the image of the cow is the goddess Hathor. And Hathor is the symbolic mother of pharaohs. And Hatshepsut is shown here suckling from Hathor. So Hathor is her mother. She is nursing her, providing her with nourishment and life. And this on the right goddess, I don't know if this is Mut or Mat, but one of the goddesses, one of the powerful female goddesses, was represented throughout the Mortuary Temple. So Hatshepsut associated herself with female goddesses and with motherhood attributes. At the same time, she claimed male pronouns and dressed like a man. So she was kind of a, gender bender, and just, really powerful, and take no prisoners kind of a person. All right. One of the most important things a pharaoh did was to undertake building programs. And Hatshepsut was an amazing builder. She built this revolutionary, the architecture for this mortuary temple had never been done before. It was all new thinking, new ways of doing. And so she built that. She redesigned, she built some original parts of Karnak and redesigned others in the temple. She built palaces and other smaller temples all over the place. She just built everywhere. And she was also an explorer and diplomat. She organized a trading fleet for the to trade along the Mediterranean. She personally led an expedition to Punt, and it was the first, and established trade relations with the nation of Punt, and brought back trees from Punt. And that was the first known transplant of fauna in history.
Wow.
And that is they've got a little fence around it. There really isn't much there, but they're claiming that's the first tree brought back by Hatshepsut there. So her rule was basically a golden age of peace and prosperity in the same way that Elizabeth I ruled England. So why isn't she a household name? We most likely have all heard of the Elizabethan age. Why haven't we heard of the age of Hatshepsut? And so the answer to that is that somebody wanted to erase her memory. And archaeologists love to tell each other stories. And if they can't find hieroglyphs to explain what happened, they'll make something up. So what they have made up is that her stepson, Thutmose III, did not want to wait for her to get out of the way to become pharaoh. And so he was mad at her. And when he did become pharaoh, finally, he chiseled away, and erased all of the images of Hatshepsut, tried to erase her from history.
Wow.
So virtually every image in the Mortuary Temple looks like this one. You can see the chisel marks here where it's been chopped out in the middle. But the images of the gods are intact, but images of Hatshepsut are gone. Hatshepsut was the daughter of a pharaoh, Thutmose I, with his great royal wife. So she was royal, totally royal on both sides. And Thutmose I, her father, she didn't have a full brother to become pharaoh, but he did have a son with one of the lesser wives, and his son was called Thutmose II. And the Egyptians didn't have the 19th century research of Mendel into peas yet, of course, so they didn't know that there was problems. They thought they were keeping the bloodline pure by brothers and sisters marrying. They didn't realize what they were doing.
Yeah. Oops.
So Hatshepsut married her half-brother, Thutmose II. Turns out that he was kind of a 90-pound weakling and was kind of sickly. And the two of them had a daughter, but they did not have a son. And but her husband, Thutmose II, did have a son with a lesser wife. So Hatshepsut had a stepson, and his name was Thutmose III. Well, the pharaoh-to-be was 2 years old when his father died, and way too young to rule. So at first, Hatshepsut became the regent. And then she decided, forget this regent. I like this. I was born and, born to a pharaoh, married to a pharaoh. I'm going to be a pharaoh. And so she did. She claimed being a pharaoh for herself. And she ruled in her own name as pharaoh for more than 20 years. And once she got the reins of power, even after he got to 14 or 15 years old, when he really was old enough to become pharaoh, she still wasn't giving it up. So he became the general of the armies, and Thutmose III went on to be one of the most notable warrior pharaohs throughout Egyptian history. He was, a soldier, a fighter, and was really good at it. But he didn't actually become pharaoh until her death, and he was about 23 at that point in time. So the story they've made up is that he was really upset about that. And when he finally did, become pharaoh, he tried to erase her as a result of that. So Egyptian drama, every society has it.
Not giving up power seems to, or holding power, right? Depending on which country you're in the world today.
Right.
As in anywhere.
Yep, that's right. Yep. So anyway, Hotshepsut is one of my favorite characters. She's, I just think, a fascinating woman. All right, so let's move south along the Nile and go to Abu Simbel. Now we're fast forwarding from Karnak to Hatshepsut is about 500 years in history. And Abu Simbel is about another 250 years in history. Ramses, this is, again, not his tomb, not even a mortuary temple. It's a tribute to his greatness. And this was built on the southern border of Egypt with Nubia at a time when, relationship with Nubia was not always smooth sailing and friendly. So the theory is that this impressive monument was built on the southern border in case the Nubians got any ideas about who was in charge. So this is an enormous temple, World Heritage Site. And there are actually two temples. The second one is nearly the same size. This one is dedicated to Ramses. The second one is his wife Nefertari. And there are little statues and tributes to their children all throughout there. Ramses is also known as Ramses the Great. He lived about 90 years, which is about 2.5 times the normal lifespan of an Egyptian in those days. There were entire generations who lived and died, and Ramses was still the pharaoh. So, he was kind of amazing. He had something like 100 children, and just an unbelievable story of Ramses there. And he also was a prolific builder because he lived so long, and he was inclined to be a builder anyway. And so there's statues of him and monuments to him all over Egypt. So we're going to explore the Ramses Temple first. We're going to go right in through that door in the middle there. You get a little bit of a sense of how big this thing is when you see how little these people look as they're approaching the door.
Yep, that's pretty big.
So when we now walk through that door and we're in the Hall of Osiris on the interior, an entire hall full of statues of the god Osiris. And then you keep going, you walk through this door here and the second door beyond it, if you can kind of see, into this inner sanctuary where seated along the back wall are 3 gods, and lo and behold, Ramses right there as a god. And this temple was built, and Joe, you were talking about how precise all their measurements and everything are.
Yeah.
2 times a year, the sun's rays were lined up perfectly, and they would enter the temple and go all the way back and strike these 4 statue figures and illuminate them twice a year. vernal
Yeah, that-
equinox and autumnal equinox. That was the only
Beyond-
times.
Beyond our understanding, you
Yep.
know, our
Yeah.
ability, man, yeah.
Yep. So this was all about tribute to Ramses. So all of the wall decorations and carvings, this is Ramses smiting enemies, and, you know, every pharaoh smites enemies. It's just required for pharaohs. The one on the right is Ramses in his chariot at the Battle of Kadesh. Kadesh was fought with the Hittites, the ancient Hittites. And from the Hittite records and other records of other peoples, the historians believe that that battle was technically more like a draw, that there wasn't really a clear winner. So Ramses got back and was probably the first spin doctor in history. He presented as an overwhelming victory for himself and his genius at leading it, and went through everything that you see carved and written is about how Ramses defeated the Hittites, and that's just not completely historically accurate from other sources. The one thing that is documented on both sides, on the Egyptian side and on the Hittite side, was that they actually signed a treaty at the end of the war after this battle. And the treaty with the Hittites is the first known treaty between nations in history. This is another carving. You see the little people here. These are all captives. And this is Ramses presiding over the captives when he took prisoners. On the exterior, you see these 4 enormous statues of Ramses here. There's also carvings in between and along the walls of the temple. On the right, you see what the common form of an Egyptian cartouche. And that is a Ramses name cartouche. You read this, the horizontal ones, you read right to left. And the way you know how to read it is you see the vertical line on the left. That's, if you think about a telegram where you have a sentence and then you say stop, that's the stop. That's the period at the end of the sentence. So you start at the right and you read till you find the vertical line. And that's the name that's contained in the cartouche. Egyptian pharaohs, like other rulers of all sorts, have both a birth name and a reigning name. And, we see that with, like, for example, popes. When Francis became Pope, he didn't use his birth name. He became Francis, Pope Francis. And so the Egyptian pharaohs did the same thing. So you see multiple cartouches with different names for the same pharaoh.
I'm hating having to skip out, but I need to take off. Thank you so much
Oh,
for doing that.
Okay.
And I will sure either watch the recording when I'm uploading it.
Yep.
And come at you for these. Thank you so much. This is
Okay.
always so. Love you guys.
Bye, Joe. How are you guys doing? You want me to wrap this up or you keep going? Okay.
No, keep going, keep going.
Okay.
I know I'm loving it. I don't wrap it up
All
either.
right. All right, cool. So the picture in the middle is a vertical cartouche. And you read this top to bottom because the line is at the bottom. On the left, you see a row of statues. Every other one this is the god Horus, and the little person is one of Ramses' children. So there's a whole row of his children intermixed with the god. Now, on the right is one of my favorite pictures. That is from Nefertari's temple at Abu Simbel. It's still at Abu Simbel. But on Ramses' temple, you will not see any statues of Nefertari. You might see her in a wall carving or something, or in an inscription somewhere, but you won't see any statues of her. But on her temple, you see statues of Ramses and Nefertari next to each other. But the thing that is highly unusual in this case is that the statue of Nefertari is the same size as the statue of Ramses. You
Her
never,
temple, right?
yep, you never see that. Even on, temples to queens and things like that, they're always smaller than their husband, the pharaoh. So the theory is that, there really was a love relationship between the two. And he just thought the sun rose and set on Nefertari. And so that's the first thing that's, unusual and interesting about this picture. The second thing is, did you all notice the Egyptian woman having her picture taken?
Yes.
You can literally go stand right in front of there and she's having a moment. Standing in front of the Nefertari temple, flinging her
Not
arms
even up
in
to the
air.
knee.
But I just love that. I just think that's so fun. All right. Just a couple more scenes inside the temple. The scene on the left is Nefertari becoming a goddess. These are two of the Egyptian goddesses who are anointing her and welcoming her into the family of gods. And this one on the right is Ramses proposing to Nefertari. He's giving her flowers, asking her to be his great royal wife. Very sweet. Okay, one of the most incredible things besides just the temple itself is that this temple is not where it was originally built. It's been moved, the entire thing. The entire ginormous mountain has been moved. The water that you see here, the temple is now right on the shores of Lake Nasser. Lake Nasser was created by the Aswan High Dam. When the dam was created, all of a sudden the water level rose in some places over 800 feet. And in other places, at least 100 feet. And all kinds of Egyptian monuments and historic sites are buried at the bottom of Lake Nasser. And this was one of them that would have been buried if it weren't for 50 nations, more than 50 nations got together with UNESCO and put together a plan to literally cut these places apart into pieces and move them and recreate them, rebuild them. So what you see on the right are two pictures that I didn't take, but are part of some of the online materials that we had access to for the trip. This is a picture of them moving the face of one of those giant statues of Ramses from the front. And you see they're up there with the ladder, and they've literally cut a piece of the face out and are lifting it out on a crane. And then next to it, you see a little nail that they drove in. Okay, so a lot of these things are sandstone. How do you know which end is up when you go to put it back together again? So they put these little nails in so that they would know which direction, which side, which direction. They could always locate exactly how it was supposed to set back up again. Just incredible engineering to recreate these and rebuild them. And, we knew before we got there that this was taken apart, and we're all over there looking for cuts and looking for, we couldn't find anything. It looked like it was just perfect. So anyway, just an enormous project. So tell me how you're feeling about this. We're about to go visit another temple called Philae Temple. We're moving into the Ptolemaic temples now. I can either try and wrap these up, or go through them quickly, or we can call it an evening. If you're done and ready to stop.
Can you do another set of the other temples later, Barb?
I could.
Next
could do-
week.
Next week. I could. No, I can't next week. I'm busy next Tuesday night.
You're gonna be in Florida.
That's right. I'm going to be in Florida. I have this really exciting thing. I'm going to the board meeting at Church of the Trinity. So, yeah, I'd rather be talking about this, but don't tell them.
I think I would vote for another session
Me
so
too.
that you don't
Yeah,
have
rather
to
than rushing.
rush through this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is really fascinating, and I don't want to feel rushed, and for us to feel like you're rushing.
Okay. I'll say one thing about Philae as a teaser. This is another entire temple that was moved so it wouldn't be flooded by Lake Nasser. It was originally on an island. They chopped it up in pieces, moved it to a whole different island, and rebuilt it.
It's amazing.
absolutely amazing.
It's completely amazing.
Barb, when
Yeah.
were those things done? When will, like the pictures you just showed us of Ramses being cut and moved? When did the 50 nations do that?
1960.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the world probably could not cooperate to do that today is the reason.
No, you probably couldn't get two nations to cooperate
Right.
today on something like that.
Right.
Good point, Ken. Good point.
And if they did, half of them would steal part of the statue on their way.
Well, I'm sure Barb, so many of pieces of what you have shown us today are in the British Museum,
Yes.
in London. And I mean, some of the Sphinxes and a lot of the friezes and statues and obelisks. And, I spent hours in the Egyptology section of the British Museum. And it's a lot of the things that you've shown us today. They were stolen, ransacked, and Egypt has been suing for years to get a lot of those things back. And I remember reading a couple of years ago that they were finally successful in getting some friezes from some of the temples sent back, but there's still just hundreds and thousands of pieces of these things all over the world.
You're right. There's so many of them, Ken. There is an entire museum in Cairo of repatriated antiquities that have been sued, that they have won lawsuits and returned them. An entire museum full of these things. And there's still thousands and thousands and thousands of them that they're trying to get back.
Wow.
All right, so we will save for another time. There's other parts to this. I'll show you Philae Temple and Komombo. That's Komombo. Those are two really important Ptolemaic temples. And then we can also talk about Cairo, the city of Cairo. Cairo is interesting because the three religions kind of coexist there. It's got enormous mosques, it's got Coptic Christian churches and Jewish temples all existing together. And it's another spot where there's a lot of religious significance and religiously important sites for all three religions.
Cool.
We can talk about that in Cairo. And I have a lot of fun pictures that aren't necessarily associated with history that are just fun and interesting, just to get an idea of the current culture in Cairo.
Yeah. This has just been fascinating, and I'm really excited to hear more, Barb. And thank you so much for all of this. Everybody, yay, Barb. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
you,
you,
Barb.
Barb.
Thanks,
Really
everybody.
appreciate it. Yeah, you've taken some really good time. It was really good to see the timeline, and also just different, locations and how, when they were set up and stuff. So thank you very much for all that.
Your knowledge is staggering. Just-
No, thank you.
Can I
Yeah.
make a suggestion for the next time for those of us with bad memories?
Sure.
Like when you go to the next temple, would you go back to the map and show us where it is, like where we're
Oh,
going
sure.
down there? So, because it helps me to keep it like this and that next timeline one. Yeah.
Yep. So what we
So I
saw
think
today
Philae is where
were,
we're-
yeah, we're all right here in the city of Luxor. And then we went all the way down here to Abu Simbel. Those were the most significant ones. So I went through them in case I didn't get through the slides. The others are fun and interesting and unique, but less, really historically, critical than the 4 that we talked about tonight. But Philae is in between. It's right along the Nile, here, near Aswan. And Kamambo is just about 25 miles north of Aswan. And the way we did this on the tour is we got on a boat in
Oh, wow.
Luxor, and we took the boat down the Nile, and we just pulled in at the dock and stopped at all these temples.
Wow.
Awesome.
Fun.
Until we got to Aswan. And then we actually flew from Aswan to Abu Simbel. We took a flight.
Mm.
Hmm.
So how far is that?
Maybe 150 miles
Huh.
from Aswan. It's about 120 miles, 125 miles from Luxor to Aswan.
And so then did you go back to Philae?
Yes. We stayed in Aswan for a couple of days. And on one of the days, we flew down to Abu Simbel and back.
Okay.
And then the rest of the time we explored around the Aswan area. We went to Philae. We went to the spice market in Aswan, which is amazing. And, we saw other sites in Aswan, in the city. And
Yeah, I
then-
saw a movie about the family's spice, it's a collection or whatever, and how it's handed down from person to person in the
Oh,
family.
yeah. The spices are serious business there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you, Barb. And we will definitely have to put the rest of it on another night for sure. I
okay,
really appreciate it.
sounds good.
Good.
Thank
I'm gonna
you.
Stop the recording